All right, friends, welcome. So this is the second time doing this video on the audit working papers. Unfortunately, the first one didn't work. Just check. So let's go through again. So the audit working papers, we're dealing with documenting the work that we have done. Okay. So as an auditor, you are required to document whatever. You don't keep the information in your head. But of course, we cannot document everything. We cannot document everything. But the significant matters that will underpin the conclusions and then the decisions that we reach as an auditor, we need to document them. So let's look at what audit documentation is all about. And when training with KPMG, and I know all audit firms will say the same thing, that if it is not documented, it is not done. Okay, it's not documented, it's not done. So you must always document it as best as you can. Sometimes people record discussions with management because they want to have something on file. So with the permission of the management, you can record it so that you can later transcribe it fully. Okay. But always everything must be translated into some form of documentary evidence. That's why we have a whole ISA on the audit documentations. Okay. All right. So let's move on and check what we have. Once again, I would want you to review the text, the core text, and of course the ACCA text as well. If you take the chapter on procedures, okay, and even on planning, for the ACCA text, planning is chapter 6, evidence is chapter 7, which is very important, okay, and procedures chapter 10. You need all of these to be able to better understand how this documentation process works. Okay. So we want to see the purpose of audit documentation. We look at the extent, nature of audit documentation. What if we did not use an ISA, but we used our own professional judgment in some areas? If it happens that way, we need to document it. So we want to use that. We see the need for documenting these areas where we deviate from. I don't want to say deviate, but we go beyond the scope of the ISAs, okay? There are advantages and disadvantages associated with the standardized audit working papers. And then we'll look at the content of a current file and permanent file. I will leave you to do more of the reading on that one. And again, formatting an audit program, I will leave that one also for you to look at it, okay? Audit program, you'll find it on page 311 through to 312, okay? You'll find it there. All right. And then I want to look at smaller entities when we audit them. How is it differently? The rules and regulations, the rules, understanding the rules of retaining the books, the papers, the working papers, and the auditor's right to retain the books. Or okay, auditors laying over the books or records of the clients. Okay, let's move on. ISA 230 deals with audit documentation, and it gives us two purposes for which we should document our work. One, the auditor must document his work, his activities, procedures, tests undertaken to show that there's a record of a sufficient appropriate evidence gathered in the course of the data of the audit, which supported the conclusions drawn by the auditor. Okay, so that's a record, a proof that we gathered the right quantity, a reliable quantity, and the relevant quantity. Okay, so looking at quantity and quality shows on the working paper. And again, the documentation shows that we conducted our work in line with the ISS or any regulatory requirements, legal requirements. For this purpose, our audit documentations must always have or show the nature of work done, the extent and timing of the procedures we've carried out, the results of the audit procedures we implemented, the evidence we gathered, okay, and any significant matters which came up out of the work we have done. We need to clearly document them, okay. Like I said, for the audit program, I want you to look at the core text, page 311 to 312, where you have a detailed example of an audit program on sales and receivables. Listen. The audit programs will normally be generic, sales and receivables. But then when you go to the field and you are working on it, you then tailor it to the needs of the client. Maybe your client is in the construction industry. Construction industries, their revenues sometimes are received in phases per completion. I've completed 40%, you get 40% of the work done to date. You file your report, and then you get it, okay? That's how revenue is recognized in phases, in stages. But if your client has to do with a bank, for example, the bank, their revenue is typically from what? The interest income, the loans they give out to clients, the interest that the clients pay, the borrowers pay to the bank, has to do with revenue. Okay, so their revenue recognition may not be the same as that of the construction industry. Construction industry, theirs come in bulk after a certain period of time, 6 months, 3 months later. But for the banks, you should be sure that almost every day, there's some interest income coming in, because today I need to pay my interest on first. Somebody will pay his interest on second. Throughout the month, there's always a day when something will have to be documented. So taking a look at the audit program, you have to adjust it. Okay, I leave that section of the learning outcome. Permanent file and then current file, I've stated that review pages 307 to 309 of the 12th edition of the Millichamp and Taylor's core auditing text. And then you'll find these details there. Just a quick one. For the permanent file, you'll find the constitution. There are articles of incorporation, certificate to commence business, any memorandum and articles, okay. Anything they want to put on file, the trust deeds, partnership deeds, okay, registration document, you find it there. In the permanent file, you find the background and history, organization of the company. So the organogram or the organizational structure, the history of the business, activities, registered office, if they have some sub-offices somewhere, you find it there. The industry in which they operate, their premises, location, talk of their main products, their main suppliers, their main customers, their staff numbers, name them, you get them there. On the permanent file, you find the systems. Are they using computerized systems, ERPs, or manual systems? Any records, any flow charts, internal control questionnaires, which has been sent to the client to answer some questions, okay? Any statistical analysis, their flow charts, their chart of accounts. You always have charts of accounts of every company, okay? Then you can also see their legal documents, any minutes, their leases, title deeds, you find it still there. Royalty information, any ongoing minutes from the board of directors, annual general meetings, funding documents. If it is a subsidiary, what is the group structure? If it is a parent company, what is the group structure? Okay, any advisors like lawyers, solicitors, architects, stockbrokers, insurers, lenders, you can see on the permanent file. The administration, the current copy of the engagement letter, the past engagement letters between the clients and the auditor, you find them there. Okay, their budgets, their staff budgets, their time budget, costing. And then again, you find the audit testing figures there or information there. Talk of rotation of visits, rotational audit testing, examination of title deeds, review of other auditors, management letters, or letter of weakness, you find it there. Any other general information that pertains to the long-term structure or concern of the company, you find it in the permanent file. The current file, like the name sounds, deals with all information that deals with this year's, the current year's audit. Okay, so I'll ask you to go through page 308 and 309. You find them there. So you find the financial statement, the current copy, the draft, the final one. Okay, the reports, any reports, journal entries, adjusting entries, audit completion checklist. Okay, Companies Act disclosure checklist, job planning information. You find it there. Systems audit information. You find in there. Account schedules, minutes, analytical review, statistical information, and any other general information pertaining to this year's, the current year's audit. You find it there. Please take a look at it. All right. What is the purpose of audit working papers? What is the purpose of audit working papers? So let me go one step back. I'm asking you to go look at this. Okay, you find the materials in the libraries, because don't rely solely on the slides. Slides are summary. Okay, slides are summary. The videos are also a summary. So you have to take the pens to go sit behind the books and review deeply. All right. to review deeply. All right. Purpose of working papers, like I said, it helps to give evidence that we planned our audit and we designed our audit in line with the appropriate audit guidelines. So that's one purpose of the audit working papers. And again, the audit working paper is to show the control that we have undertaken, the kind of work we've done for this year's work, this year's audit. Do we have the control over this year's work? Okay. So it will show that, yes, we have provided a record of a detailed test we conducted, both compliance tests, control tests, substantive tests, analytical reviews. We'll show it on the working papers. That's the purpose of the working paper for this year's work. It also shows the conclusions we have drawn, a record of it, the evidence we have gathered at each stage of the audit to support the conclusions we draw, okay? And it helps us as auditors to be held accountable or to even account for the work we have done. You call me and ask me, why did you draw a conclusion that there could be a fraud risk inherent in the bank reconciliation or in the treasury function? My working papers will tell me that because from work I have done, the extent of work and the nature and timing of work I have done, I've seen that there's no segregation of duties. Only one person prepares the bank statement. He is the same person who reviews. He's the same person who has custody of the bank statements or goes for the bank statement. He's the same person who writes the check and he's one of the signatories to the bank account, or he's the sole signatory. So the working papers will give me the grounds upon which I can defend the conclusions I have drawn, okay? What the working paper also does is that it gives our supervisors, the audit managers, the audit partners, the in-charges to review our work. So they supervise our work based on your working paper and tell you that you've done a lot of work, that's sufficient, that's okay, or you've done incomplete work, can you go on and do this other work? So the working papers will give them the grounds upon which they will direct us, they will supervise us and sign off our work, okay? So it's very important. Again, the other purposes of working papers is to enable evidence to be available in the final review stage. So at the final review stage, when we are signing off the financial statement, the working papers are like the scrap paper that will tell us that we actually did a detailed work, for which reason we can say that, yes, the financial statements show a true and fair view or does not show a true and fair view, and that we've complied with the Companies Act, we've complied with the IFRS standards, we've complied with any country-specific regulatory requirements, okay? Again, there are times that the auditor may depart from the requirements of the ISA. He wants to use his own professional judgment to do a certain work. The question is, why did you depart from this norm? Why? For example, let me cite this. Let's say our materiality threshold tells us that if you want to audit this particular class of accounts or group of accounts, choose transactions that are 1,000 and above. Now, you decided that this area is fraud prone. People could commit fraud over there. So instead of choosing items or transactions which are 1,000 and above, I'm going to choose items which are 700, including 700, 500 pounds worth of transactions. Okay, so you want to do this and you must justify why you departed from the norm. So the working papers will give you that evidence, that ground for you to justify why you departed from the norm, the rationale for the departure, and the details of the work you've done and the conclusions you've drawn. Okay. The auditor could also, in exceptional situations, want to perform audits after the accounts have been signed. Maybe we identify some imminent transactions or some imminent activities that could occur after the year end. But the accounts have been signed. We go on and do some extra work, and the working papers will prove that we did extra work based on what we identified during the course of the audit or after the course of the audit. Again, what we want to also do is that this working paper should serve as an avenue for the quality control reviewer. Could be normally it's a partner, experienced partner. So this experienced audit partner would want to review our work and see whether we follow the right quality control procedures, we complied with any regulatory regimes or requirements or legal standards. So the working papers will give them the grounds upon which they conduct these quality control reviews. Okay. Typically, what is the content of the working papers? After saying this, you will hear me repeating this again in their subsequent slides, so don't be worried. Now, each working paper at a minimum should have the name of the client, okay? Should have the name of the client, the accounting period within which we are auditing, the management assertion, the transactions and account balances we are testing. The objective should also be clearly stated out. For example, we want to ascertain or test the CEA, let's say CEA completeness, okay, existence and accuracy of the PPE. So in that case, you've started the transaction, the balance, you are testing the management assertion. Okay, the objective is stated, not just for substantive testing, but for even control testing, okay? You want to carry out a test to check whether there is adequate segregation of duties in the treasury function under the bank reconciliation statement preparation or function, okay? So objectives should be stated. Details of work you have conducted should be clearly documented in the working paper. The sample you tested, the substantive test you undertook, the control test you undertook, okay? What is the outcome of the test? What conclusions can be drawn? The one who prepares the working papers must always put his initials there. KPMG, you would normally use initials, and I'm sure most audit firms use initials. So you hear people call me RKT, Richard Kojotevia. That is my initials, okay? The one who reviewed will also put his initials there, and we always have to date it. The date you completed the work, the one who reviewed the work would also date it, okay? Most audit firms will have standardized forms of working papers and checklists, okay? And it will also include some schedules, analysis prepared by the client, okay? Which we'll normally use and check whether they have been properly prepared. So, I mean, you come out from the university, you join Grant Thornton, you join KPMG, PwC, you know nothing about real-time audit unless you might have done some internships with them. So the firms will always typically have a standardized working paper which you can use. But of course, it is always required that, and that's what I experienced in KPMG, that you can expand the working paper to make it as detailed as possible to cover any loophole, okay? So when you are designing your working papers, when you are using your working papers, prepare them in such a way that you can gather sufficient complete audit evidence. The idea is that we want to better understand the audit process you have used, and any other person who picks your work should be able to understand the nature of work that you have done, okay? So auditors should document in their working papers what is important. We can't take everything. We cannot document everything, else we'll be writing theses during the audit phase, okay? So those significant items, those important records of meetings with the clients, those significant third-party confirmations which underpins your conclusions, document them, okay? And in these, try to at least state the plans that you did, the planning of the work, the nature of the work you have done, the time and the scoping of the work you have done, and the extent of the audit procedures you applied. Once you have the objectives, you must always have a conclusion drawn to show that, yes, based on this ABCD done, I then have to derive conclusions X, Y, Z, okay? Now, like I said, working papers show who performed the work, who reviewed the work, the dates they were carried out, initial them, okay? Now, again, if you use professional judgment, you departed from the ISA, I'm repeating it. For whatever reason why you are departing from an ISA, you are using your own professional judgment, indicate the reasoning behind this, okay, and write it down. So auditors should record in their working papers their reasoning on all significant matters which require the exercise of judgment and their conclusions. Now, where the auditor has information, okay, which is not consistent with the final conclusions about a particular matter, what should we do? We must always indicate or document this inconsistency and how we dealt with such inconsistency. So, for example, we've arrived at a conclusion, evidence had is inconsistent, client management is giving us different information. This is an inconsistency. Document it. And how did you deal with it? Are they supposed to pass adjustments? Let them pass the adjustments, okay? Documentation, like I said, we can't document everything. So only those items which are significant and which are of material judgment should be documented. So use your professional know-how. If you don't know what to document, write everything, document everything. I would always say the better is, the more the better, okay? Then at the end of the day, it is your audit partner or your manager or your in charge who will tell you, well, cut this one off, leave this one in, okay, adjust this and that. But of course, any item which is of material and significant consideration should be documented. Now, one more thing is that if your worksheet is quite detailed, comprehensive, my good friends, it's better. Because at the end of the day, you would realize that you are using one stone to kill 2 or 3 birds, okay? So for example, if your documentation shows that you have a detailed audit plan, then you don't have to prepare different documentation on meeting compliance testing. Let's say your detailed plan covered compliance with some matters, XYZ matters. Let's say compliance with climate change procedures, and your work paper has covered it. You don't need to go and prepare another working paper on compliance with climate change, okay? So as much as you can make it comprehensive so that it can cover other areas. That's what we call corroboration, corroborative evidence. So you realize that your working paper on receivables or in sales and revenue would have some link with raw materials purchase or procurement, or with customer invoices in terms of some discrepancy with doubtful debts, okay? So whatever you do should be quite comprehensive. Like I said, most audit firms will have standardized forms and checklists so that you can follow suit, you can adjust it, okay? Today, most companies use computerized working papers, not the manual one. They ensure that these working papers or documentations conform with the regulations and the ISS. You can change them, you can amend them, okay? Now, one key thing we should know is that working papers is a matter of judgment. Yes, it's true. But whenever you produce your working paper, make sure that a layman who doesn't even understand what you are doing can at least read some meanings into it. So prepare your working papers to the extent that somebody can understand the conclusion you've drawn, the basis upon which you drew the conclusion, and the work you did which led to that conclusion, okay? Because at the end of the day, you could be dragged to court. And when they drag you to court, it is your working paper that will tell the lawyer, who is not an accountant, the solicitor, who is not an auditor, the judge, who is not an auditor. When you tender in that evidence, then they will see, oh, yeah, he did 1 + 1 and realized 1 + 1 was not giving him 2. 1 + 1 was giving him 3. No wonder he drew that conclusion that there could be a missing link in terms of their mathematical accuracy, okay? So that's what you should do. Professional judgment is good. Anything you do, exercise professional judgment as objective as possible. But whilst exercising professional judgment, remember, friends, you must detail out all the matters, all the information available, any discussions with management, and the conclusions management drew. Write them down in your documentation, okay? And then you yourself as an auditor, what conclusion did you draw? The conclusion you drew, friends, should be logical. You should start from A and go to B and come to C before you end at the decision D. You don't want to start from D, decision, then you come to C before you come to A, and then you come to B. Let it flow in a logical, sequential manner, and the reasoning behind it should be so transparent, objective, okay? Because, like I said, you could be questioned by an external person who, with the benefit of an insight, may not know what you have done, okay? So always make sure you have it. And of course, it serves as a basis for the review control, quality control partner to review your work. So quality control is important for an audit of financial statements, okay? It sets out clearly ISA 220. So 220 deals with quality control, 230 deals with audit documentation. 220 sets out the requirement for the engagement partner to be satisfied that in the course of the audit, the auditors had gathered sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So his review would disclose this, okay? Now, it does not imply that each working paper must include evidence of review, but at least a good number of them, okay? Sometimes they use their own sampling method to select some working documentations and then review them, working papers, but at least it should show that it has been reviewed and who reviewed it, when was it reviewed, and what was the outcome of the review. Any work you do on your working papers, have this in mind that somebody will use your working papers next year to do his work. So any working papers you do, any documentation you plan for today would be the basis for planning for tomorrow. So make sure your work is logical, is sequential, with the idea that tomorrow I will not be on these engagements. Somebody will come and do it. And this person who is coming has no knowledge about the work I've done. So I must document it in such a way that somebody picks my work and can build upon it without asking questions. So no lazy work, please. No lazy work, no slavish, dull work. Please do professional work. Avoid mistakes as much as possible. We are wrapping up. Ownership of the books and papers. Who owns them? Now, if the relationship is that of a client and a professional, okay, if the relationship, no, go back one step. If the relationship is between the client and then the auditor is that of a client and a professional, then all the documents are the property of the accountant, of the auditor. The only exceptions are that the original documents are for the client. Okay, their bank statement, their invoices, the original document is for them. Okay. If the relationship is that of a principal and an agent, the shareholders contracted me to work on it, okay? Or an HMRC has contracted me to go and undertake some kind of tax audit, okay? Then we are saying that the papers become the property of the client, okay? The papers become the property of the client, okay? So take note of this. Now the auditor has a lien, okay? They have the right to retain your books if you don't pay them their audit fees. So they could possess the books physically, your files, your papers, which you have delivered to them and which they have used in course of their audit, and they will keep it until such a time when you pay them their audit fees, okay? The final thing I want to say here is that you as an auditor, as much as possible, you must make sure you keep your working papers and documentations for at least 5 years after the audit report has been signed. So 2021, you conducted the audit. It was signed in 2022, March, June. You must make sure you keep it for 5 years after the books have been signed in June. So you have to go for 2023, 24, 25, 26, 27 June. Okay. So 2027 June before you can think of archiving them, not destroying them, because you need to archive them after the work is done. I end here, friends. There's a quiz study on 316 Charlatan Furniture. Please take a look at it. Attempt the self-testing questions, and then there's an examination question I have clearly cited, 317 to 318. Typical scenario where auditors could identify the weakness in a particular transaction. They tell you the consequences of these weaknesses, and they recommend feasible corrective actions to resolve. Attempt these 2 questions at will. What I want to say is that, listen, usually, my friends, we want you to put yourself in the shoes of an auditor, where we give you a case study. Okay, so if you look at that question on page 317, it's a very good question, okay, where we give you the question. We ask you that this is a scenario, tell us, okay? Now, I would rather want you to go extra mile. And I say 5 C's. C for Canada, C for Charlie. 1, identify the condition. For example, bank reconciliations are not prepared on a monthly basis. The next thing, identify the cause. The cause is because they don't have enough staff who will do the work, okay? Then identify the criteria. The bank reconciliation is not prepared on a monthly basis, violates, let's say, the company's standard operating procedure section 42.3. Okay, Then identify the consequences. If bank reconciliations are not produced or are not prepared and reviewed on a monthly basis, there could be the fraud risk inherent in the treasury function, and then provide corrective actions. So it should be prepared on a monthly basis. If feasible, they should get other officials who will review after the, okay, so that's it. So normally 5, okay, find the condition. What is causing the condition? What criteria is it violating? Which consequences would it have on the company? And what corrective actions do you want to recommend? It's very important. You know this, keep this. And then we'll finish this one up when you have some tutorial. In the tutorial class, ask questions with your tutor and they will sort it out for you. Friends, I leave it here, and good to see you all. Bye for now.